This week we're going to be making an angel food cake, and this is actually for a staff member's birthday, which is coming up this month. And I've never made an angel food cake before, so this should be interesting. So let's get started. Alright, so here I'm starting with the cake flour, and they do recommend that you not use any other type of flour than cake flour, or your cake can wind up being too heavy. Alright, you can see that I'm measuring it out over this metal bowl just to keep it from spilling everywhere, but it's actually going to get dumped into a different bowl once it's measured. And you can see how I'm leveling it off, but not packing it down, just leveling it off. And I will put the full recipe down in the description just so you can look at all the measurements for yourself. And I'm dumping the flour that I spilled back in and closing it up properly, squeezing all the air out and taping it closed so it will be fresh for next time. And when I measure the salt, I like to just kind of shake the measuring spoon a little bit to make it even and then dump it in so you don't have to worry about leveling. And when you whisk that up, it does two things. It aerates it, so it makes it fluffier, and it also mixes it, of course. Okay, so in this recipe you have to measure out your sugar, which is what I'm doing now, and put it in the blender. And you actually have to blend it in order to grind it up even finer and get more air in it. So the angel food cake is really light and fluffy, so pretty much everything in this recipe is geared toward making the cake as light and fluffy as possible. Alright, and if you don't seal up your sugar really well, like what I'm doing here, it will be hard as a rock next time you go to use it. So here I'm blending for 1 minute on medium, and then you have to put half of the sugar mixture, or not mixture, just the sugar. You have to put half the sugar in a small bowl and set it aside for later. Okay, then you have to put your flour mixture from earlier into the blender with that half of the sugar that stayed in the blender. And you have to blend that for another 1 minute to make it extra light and fluffy. Now I'm going to be separating my eggs. So separating means that you're separating the white and the yolk. So this recipe calls for egg whites only. And that's common in recipes that need to be light and fluffy. And I'm showing you here how to separate the eggs, which is my method. I pour it into a spoon, or in this case I found that this ice cream scoop worked pretty well. And you can see I'm holding the yolk in while letting the white flow out, or sometimes pulling it out a little bit. Then I put the yolk aside in a different bowl, and you can see I did it in that little bowl there, which makes it easier in case you mess up and you get a little bit of yolk into it. You have to start all over. So if you do it one by one like this, that means if you mess up you won't have to do all 12 eggs all over again. So here I'm going to show you one more, but I did actually have to do this 12 times because this recipe calls for 12 egg whites. So I'm doing just one at a time in the small glass bowl, just in case I mess up and get any yolk in. Because you cannot have any yolk in, or it won't fluff up as lightly as it would be with just the whites. And then I'm setting my yolk aside in this other little metal bowl, which I'm going to use for a different recipe at another time. And the whites go in my big metal bowl. And of course I'm wiping up afterwards because of risk of salmonella. Alright, so now I'm going to do my cream of tartar. You have to add the cream of tartar into the large bowl there that has all 12 egg whites, like that. And the cream of tartar is what helps it fluff up and stick together which I should be explaining that better scientifically, but basically that's how I understand its function. It's what helps you get that lightness and fluffiness. Same thing as when you're making meringue. Okay, so right now you have to put with the motor running, you have to slowly add that sugar that you set aside earlier while beating on medium-high. And that's gonna take about 6 minutes because we're gonna do that until soft peaks form. So I'm gonna show you in a second. I'm testing to see if there's soft peaks or not, and there aren't. So I'm gonna keep going, and you can see that the mix is getting fluffier and thicker. All right, so that's more like soft peaks. You can see they're like little peaks, but the tips flop over. I'm gonna go a bit longer to get some even better soft peaks like you see there. All right, so next step is we're sifting the flour mixture over the egg whites in 3 additions. I didn't have a real sifter, so I'm just using this colander, but it works pretty well. And after each addition, you have to fold it into the mixture. So here I'm demonstrating folding. Basically, you just have to run your spatula along the outside of the bowl, cut through the middle, and then fold half the mixture over the other half. And I'm gonna show it to you again in just a second here. Okay, so around the edge, through the middle, and fold over. Around, through, and fold over. And keep doing that, but rotate the bowl, or just make sure you're doing it cutting through a different direction each time, like that. And this just helps you get the ingredients mixed together while preserving your fluffiness. Because if you just get in there and mix, you're going to be mixing all your air right out of your mixture, which is not what we want. We want this to stay super fluffy and light. All right, here I'm setting the oven to 325, and it's gonna be preheating for me. All right, here, this is the special cake pan. Big thanks to Paula for lending the pan. And you can see how wonderful and light and fluffy the mix is. And I'm just rotating the pan to make sure that I get the mix in there evenly. All right, we're ready to go into the oven. You can see I have the pan at a medium setting. Great, so as you can see, our cake came out really nicely, and I'll be back tomorrow to cut this in horizontal layers and then put the whipped cream and strawberries in between. But for now, this needs to sit out on the cooling rack and cool completely for 3 hours. So I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Okay, it's the next day and I'm washing all these strawberries. I'm not showing this part, but I do like to put in a tiny bit of soap and just kind of rub them together like what I'm doing there, and make sure it's all rinsed off so they don't taste like soap, but they're also going to be very clean. And I'm spreading them out on towels like that to dry them. And now I'm cutting it. So I'm showing you my method here. I cut a little V shape in the top like that, and then put the knife in that V so it's not going to slide around and cut me. Here I'm just cutting off a little bad spot there. And then carefully centering the knife and slice. See? So the knife sits in that little notch, so that's what's keeping me from cutting myself. Now this method is really only for people who have experience and confidence with using a knife. So if you have any doubts at all about your ability with using a knife, or you're just not very experienced or not very confident, please do not use this method. Instead, you would want to sit your strawberry down on a cutting board or counter and do the exact same method, but do it with it sitting down on the counter like that, so it's a little bit safer. All right, it's whipped cream time. So I had my bowl and beaters and whipped cream all in the refrigerator. I think I actually had the bowl in the freezer even. So that's because you want everything to be super cold, because your whipped cream is going to whip up better with coldness. So I'm adding 2 tablespoons of sugar for 1 pint of cream, because you want 1 tablespoon per cup, and there's 2 cups in a pint. Okay, so go ahead and beat it up, and I'm going to show you how it goes through a frothy phase like that first. Oh, here's where I added the vanilla because I forgot to add it earlier when I was supposed to into the cake recipe, so I'm adding it into the whipped cream instead. Okay, so you can see it's getting a lot thicker now. It's fluffing up and it's starting to bunch up, sort of like clouds. I like it to be extra thick and fluffy, so I'm gonna do it even a bit more. And you can see how lovely it is. I'm smiling there because I'm about to go lick the beaters, actually. Okay, so now I'm running the knife around the outer edge of the cake pan to release the cake, and I had to do that several times. Now I'm trying to pull it out, but it's stuck. So finally I pushed on the bottom and it popped out. And there's the cake. All right, I'm sorry you can't see this a bit more clearly because I am left-handed and the camera was on the right, but I am rotating the cake while cutting with this big, long, serrated knife. So I'm cutting it into 3 layers. And if you're not familiar with knives, serrated are the ones with those little teeth on the edge of the blade instead of a smooth blade. It works better for cutting delicate things like cake or bread. Okay, I tried to lift this off with spatulas, but it actually didn't work so well. So I decided to use my hands instead. And lifting off the second layer, and then we're gonna put on the whipped cream and the strawberries. If you ever have trouble with when you're trying to spread frosting or whipped cream, if you find that your cake is starting to break and crumbs are getting into your topping, that means you need to put on more topping. Really glop it on and then just use the spatula to sort of mush it around lightly. So your spatula is never coming into contact with your cake if you have enough topping, and you'll avoid that problem of ending up with your cake crumbling or shredding apart as you're trying to frost. And I'm putting the strawberries so that they show very prettily around the edge. As you can see, my top layer got a bit broken and I had to piece it back together. But that's what whipped cream is for, to hide that. And I'm going to take this downstairs to serve to the birthday person. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen, and see you again next time. Bye!